Welcome to the Region Free Gamers podcast and part 2 of our discussion on the best and worst video game controllers. Welcome back to the Region Free Gamers podcast, the podcast that's fluent in gaming. My name's Paul, I'll be your host today, and as always, we'd be super grateful if you guys subscribed and left a comment and review on iTunes. And hey, while you're at it, tell a friend about the show, even if it's your mom, and she asks if the PlayStation plays those Nintendo tapes. We'd really appreciate it. And my co-hosts, who I love, because otherwise I'd be sitting here talking to myself and it would be super awkward.
I listened to that, Paul.
My mom would listen to that too. To the south of me, in Virginia, Arnaldo.
Whoop whoop.
And to the east of me, out of New York City, Ozzy.
Hey y'all.
And to the north of me, out of Helsinki, Masa.
Yo.
So before we get into what we've been playing lately, just a heads up for our listeners, as in the episode description, this is part 2 of our breakdown on and ranking of video game controllers. We actually recorded that conversation a few weeks ago without Ozzy. So once we finish catching up on what we've been playing lately, this episode will suddenly be free from Ozzy's clutches.
Well,
it will in fact be Ozzy free.
Ozzy free.
So,
Ozzy free gamers.
The Ozzy Free Gamers podcast.
I'd buy that for $1.
See, that sounds much nicer than taking them out back behind the barn.
Yeah, he goes and joins all the other Aussies in heaven. All right. So anyway, hey, you know what, Ozzy, what have you been playing lately?
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, since I am going to be the one that's going to be taken out back and popped, so I might as well just get my last rites out. Yeah, I've been playing a few games lately. I've recently become quite invigorated with, the games I've been playing, and I've become reacquainted with the lovely machine that is the Switch. And if you guys don't know, I love the Switch. I want to make love to it. I want to marry it. I think it's a wonderful piece of tech. And
it is very sexy.
Oh, it's super sexy. I mean, I don't know how, this is kind of like the nirvana of what game, designers, like game console designers, have wanted to do for ages, for so many ages, like going back to the Nomad, of just the perfectly seamless, portable, console. So it's just wonderful. But in any case, I'm not gonna get on a Switch train because I know that Masa would jump like.
Yeah, I was like, this is a bit
his ears are perking up right now.
I
like
thought
Masa's...
I was into myself for a while there. It felt like making laugh to the sweet spot.
I know Masa's ears are like perking up, like he's like that dog that just listens to the bell that's gonna give him food. So it's like a Pavlovian response from Masa, and he's just like, "What? Did someone mention Switch?" So I'm not gonna get into that. But no, I've been playing Octopath Traveler. So came out I think about a week ago, even though it feels longer than that because I've just been like marathoning it. And I love that game, guys. As you guys all know, we all love our RPGs. We all love our old school JRPGs, and Octopath Traveler does that, and it really harkens back to an old era of RPGs that it's no longer that prevalent, but it does it with a certain degree of style and innovation that you don't necessarily find in games that try to do the old school RPG thing. And it has enough modern conventions that it's still very much fun to play. I've cooled off a little bit on it just for one particular reason. And so let me ask you guys, if you guys had to answer, what's the most frustrating thing about old school RPGs? What would you say?
Grinding.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly.
That's exactly it. that's exactly it.
Yeah.
So the first 8 kind of vignettes, when you get all the characters in Octopath Traveler, they're very seamless. There's almost no grinding whatsoever. They just kind of go into one or the other. But then you finish So each character, you have 8 characters, and each one of them has its own story, and each story is subdivided into 4 episodes for each character. So the first go around, you just get the stories for all the guys, and all the party members. And then after you got in them all, then you have to like grind for like 10 hours just to go to the next episode, because you're not up to the level that you're supposed to be in order to go to the next episode, even though you've done everything that the game asks for you. So that just kind of really hit a big wall for me. I was just like, this is a really bad pacing decision. And the game has this recommended level suggestion. And so you finish all the characters and you're like at level 15, and then the next thing is like level 22. So it just kind of really hits a massive wall where you need to grind. And so right now I'm in a level where you have 8 characters and you can only have 4 party members. So I know that whenever I want to get to the other stories, I'm going to have to grind them up to the level that they need to be at. So that just unnecessarily pads the gameplay. And it just, it's a really good thing that I love the battle mechanics in the game. The battle mechanics are amazing. Because otherwise I would be really, really pissed off, which I kind of am. I really think that it's a bad decision. Yeah. But what do you guys think about that?
Sorry, Ozzy, I kind of wonder about that, because like one of the things, I guess it's a balance matter, right? Because for example, when I was playing Ni no Kuni 2, I just found it to be very easy all the way through. Like the way they paced the level progression just made it so that the kind of random encounters weren't really much of a challenge. And so one thing that I do like in RPGs is when you encounter, a boss, or even just like when regular battles are very interesting and challenging. But I guess you've hit the point now in Octopath where it's not even challenging, it's just kind of impossible and frustrating.
Yeah, well, what I've done is that you play as one main character, you pick it at the beginning, and my main character is the Huntress. And what I've done is that she is way over leveled, but all the other party members are not. The problem is that if you go to a place, an area that is like 4 levels above one of your characters, then they just one-hit you. They just one-hit you and you're dead. So you stand no chance. But I've tried to do it enough where I have 3 party members that are pretty high level and then 1 party member that's not that high level. And so what you end up doing is just reviving. So, it's kind of like power leveling. And it kind of gets it done. And I'll tell you what, I mean, I like it when I'm challenged and I'm facing a boss that's quite a bit high level. Some of the bosses, I think most of the bosses take like 40 minutes to an hour in order to beat, which is quite significant. So anytime I want to go into a boss, I'm just thinking, okay, I'm going to have to set a time aside, because every time I do it, my Switch ends up starting to run out of battery. So I have to just plug it back into the console, into the dock. So it's a little bit of a trick, and I wish that they had handled this a little bit more elegantly. I do think it's an amazing game. I'm not gonna put it down. I think that it's an amazing game. I love it. I can't get enough of it. But I do wish that the grinding was better handled, to be honest.
I gotta say, I can totally relate to what you were just, saying, because the main reason why I'm now I just basically yesterday started playing Octopath Traveler a bit more, because I was actually playing Shining Resonance Refrain since the release. So it came out almost 2 weeks ago. But I hit a point, like that game can also get quite grindy. But to make things even worse, I don't know how it's handled in Octopath, but in Shining Resonance, the non-party members don't gain any XP. And
that's always frustrating.
Yeah, and also, like, what I realized, like, I read a spoiler regarding a later chapter, and I'm really happy that I read that, because I could have actually gotten into a no-win situation, because I found out that there's gonna be a part where you actually have to use like 2 party members, like in particular, like you can choose whoever you want, but it's gonna be like these 2 guys. And I was like, okay, so my party is now at level 40, but like one of these guys that I actually haven't used at all is only level 15. And I was like, God damn it, like I really gotta start grinding. And then it's actually surprisingly slow in Shining Resonance. Like, I know that there's this special dungeon which is supposed to help with grinding. I haven't done that yet, but at least like in Octopath, like when you have the lower level characters, they actually catch up to the higher level characters quite fast.
Yeah, I mean that's
but yeah, in
something...
Shining Resonance, yeah, it's really slow.
Yeah, that's something that in Octopath, the 4 party members that are not in your party, they don't gain any XP. Okay. So you're stuck with them. And so, for example, the cleric right now, I haven't used her since I got her. And so she's a level 12, whereas everyone else is like level 27, level 24, and it's just kind of very disparate. Once you actually get the cleric back into it, if she survives a battle, she's going to gain like 3 levels automatically just because you're fighting so many high level characters. But it's just kind of frustrating because in Octopath, you're supposed to have this 8 stories that you want to experience. And so you could technically say, well, I just want to see the story of the scholar. But the problem is that if you want to just see the story of the scholar, then you're just going to have to grind in order to get up to the level. So you're going to have to mix and match the stories necessarily in order to be able to get more experience. And so it just makes it a very frustrating dance where you can't really progress naturally. And so you're kind of stopped artificially from progressing the story that you want to see. And so I find it very inelegant, and it's just a very bad design decision that if I have something to fault the game for, it's just that. I mean, again, I love the battle system. And I guess let me speak positively about the game now. For example, the Huntress, every character has its own kind of like battle system. That's the way I put it. And the Huntress, for example, can capture beasts. So basically, for the Huntress, you basically have Pokemon. You have like a Pokemon battle system in it where you can actually get monsters and unleash them on the enemy.
That's not a selling feature for me, just letting you know.
Oh, well, it is for me. And if you don't like that, then you don't use her. But it is pretty awesome. So I also recently just got jobs. So you can actually make, for example, the Huntress, she's a hunter, but I also got a job for her. So she's also doubles as a cleric. So she can also heal and do all the things that, a cleric would do. So there's a lot of variety in the battle system where you feel like every character has its own kind of quirks and niche, and they all feel like its own RPG battle system unto itself. So that's the reason why I'm not as bothered, but I do, I do get frustrated where I want to just progress the story and then I just have to go around, try to find monsters to fight so I can level up. And the thing also is, and I'll stop talking now in a little bit, the thing is that if you play the game regularly, the random battles are excessive. They're exorbitant. You can't walk for 3 or 4 steps without hitting a random battle. But the scholar can equip the skill where the random battles can be lowered. The problem is there's no middle ground. If you don't have it on the skill, then you are going to hit a random battle every time. And if you have it on, then you don't hit enough random battles. So it's just kind of this weird dichotomy that you're facing where you don't really hit the sweet spot.
Yeah,
that's unfortunate because like it's a modern game, right? I mean, haven't we seen enough RPGs developed by now that we can kind of get a grip on how to do these things? Yeah, I mean, I'm not a developer, right? But
I would think so. I mean, I do think that Japanese developers are kind of very insular, and so I think in trying to capture that old school nostalgia and old school feel, I think they put a lot of stock into this. But seriously, I mean, random battles should not be a thing anymore. Random battles, I mean, they were designed in order to be able to deal with design limitations and memory limitations back in the 80s. There's no reason why we should still have random battles.
Agreed.
Chrono Trigger fixed this over 23 years ago, and they did it right the first time. Why the hell don't you do it as well? So,
yeah, I gotta say that's definitely like one thing that has been kind of bothering me about Octopath Traveler. Especially lately, I've been playing like nothing but like modern RPGs. Like I mentioned, Shining Resonance, and yeah, it feels so weird, like walking through these empty fields, which are actually like really gorgeous in Octopath. But then you can't truly like enjoy it because you know that in 2 steps there's gonna be a random battle.
Yeah, it's very frustrating.
And there's nothing you can do about it. Well, until you get that one character who can, lower the appearance rate, but still.
Hey, so before we move on, here's a quick question. Masa, let's say it's my birthday and my mom is going to get me a game. Am I picking Shining Resonance Refrain or Octopath Traveler?
That's a tough one. I would say Octopath, because I do believe that it's the better game out of these two. But I think, personally for me, I think I'm probably gonna finish Shining Resonance before, simply because it did come out a few days before Octopath, and I'm now like maybe 45 hours into it. So I'm like more than halfway through the game. But yeah, I would say Octopath is definitely the better game, and one thing where there's like a huge difference is the writing. Because I think Octopath, like, it's not as dialogue heavy as Shining Resonance, but like, I think it's a very well written game. Especially like all the dialogue, all this like short like story, like you get this like sort of like, I don't know, it's kind of like a book, but yeah, like Shining Resonance is one of those very cheesy RPGs. I mean, it's funny, and I mean, like, cheesy RPG writing can be a lot of fun, but like Shining Resonance is definitely not like, I mean, this ain't no like Shakespeare.
Yeah, I mean, Paul, I don't think it's even a question. I mean, I think Octopath, I mean, it sounds like I'm coming down hard on it, and that's unfair to it because I'm obsessed with this game. Like Masa said, the writing, I wouldn't say that it's Shakespeare, but it is very well written. It's a very kind of serious, charming, where it needs to be game. And some of the vignettes are actually very dark, surprisingly dark.
Yeah, it's Primrose.
Primrose's vignette is very, very dark. I mean, you see prostitution, you see people getting killed, you know, like right in front of you. It's something that I don't think that Japanese RPGs have traditionally done. So, you know, the writing is very well done. The graphics are excellent, and the music is just mind blowing. The music is just utterly mind blowing. I think it's my favorite soundtrack of the last, I would say, 5 years. It's right up there with Nier Automata in terms of soundtrack for the last 5 years. So it sounds like I'm coming down hard on it. I'm just bothered because I wish that it would have done that better, because otherwise it would have been a perfect game to me.
But yeah, I gotta say, like, yeah, sorry to interrupt, but about the music, what's really interesting about the music is that it actually doesn't really sound, like, for the most part, it doesn't really sound like video game music, kinda. It sounds very cinematic, and like the feel of the game is surprisingly, especially like when you have these cutscenes and the music and the voice scenes, it's a very cinematic experience, which feels very weird, considering that this is basically a 2D old school RPG. But I mean, that's really amazing, and I've been really impressed. And yeah, the soundtrack is really, I mean, that's the real deal.
Yeah, what have you been playing lately, Paul?
What I've been playing, well, Arnie last week, or the last time we chatted anyhow, asked me about Danganronpa. I mentioned it, but we didn't really have time to talk about it. Yeah, Trigger Happy Havoc for the Vita. I finished it, I don't know, a week ago or so, and man, you know, we're entering a time now, or we've been in a time now, at least for me, where I'm constantly craving something different, right? Like, I've been playing video games for like 30 years. I know what a JRPG looks like. I know what a shoot 'em up looks like. I enjoy them, but it doesn't mean that I don't want to have new gaming experiences. So Danganronpa really, really fit the bill very well there. It's like kind of a visual novel almost. In fact, I would like not having played a Phoenix Wright game for the Nintendo DS, but just kind of having seen screenshots and stuff like that, I would say that it's probably a lot like Phoenix Wright. There, basically, you have 16 high school students because it's a Japanese game, so it has to have high school students, and they're all trapped in this school, and the only way to escape is to get away with murdering another student. And so it's got like this kind of dark, macabre style to it. The artwork is fairly unique and pretty morbid. Like it's got a really cool look and feel to it. It's fairly well written, And so the game is basically divided up into getting to know your classmates, again, because it's Japanese. There's like a dating sim almost element to it. Almost, because there's also male students and you don't date them, right? So you get to know them, then a murder happens, then you collect clues and investigate the murder, and then you go to a class trial. And the class trial is sort of like this little collection of mini games that you play, where you try to figure out who the murderer is. And that happens for about 5 or 6 chapters. I think it's 6 chapters. So it's not a terribly long game. It depends on how fast you read and how much you want to hear the voice dialogue. If you're someone who skips the voice dialogue because you just want to get on with it, that's obviously going to make the game a lot shorter. So, yeah, I don't know, man. Really cool game. There's a sequel. I'm going to play the sequel, and we'll see how that goes.
Was this? I don't recall if it was developed by the same developers that did Zero Escape versus Last Reward. But
I don't think so. I think that's a different developer.
Yeah, I don't believe
but
it's the same people.
yeah,
you can. I think you can tell just by the artistic style. Like the artistic style for Danganronpa is very, very unique and really sets it apart from everything else.
Yeah, that's the one thing.
Also, go on.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that whenever I hear people talking about it, that's like the one thing that everybody points to. It's like, this is not something that you've played before. Like, this is its own thing, and it's very unique, and it sort of takes established tropes and plays with them a little bit, doesn't just force feed you the same thing as other video games have in the past. So it's supposed to be a really like interesting and fun experience from what I've heard.
Yeah, I had at no point during the game was I sitting there and I'm like, I just got to get by this part and see what's next. No, it was all largely pretty enjoyable. And once you finish the game, there's a mini game that you can play in. It's not New Game Plus. It's just like new menu options that open up for you. And there's this little like resource collecting / building mini game that I can't even use words to describe. Like, it's not something that I've ever seen before. And it was surprisingly addictive for like 2 hours. And then I put it down because I beat it.
Yeah,
but that's the point, right? Like, it's not supposed to be a full game in itself. It's just like this fun little reward for finishing the game. So I thought that was a really clever little inclusion too.
Yeah, my problem with visual novels, Paul, I mean, I don't mind them, but like I said, I played Zero Escape, and my problem with them is just I don't mind a visual novel as long as I like the story and the writing. And I find that a lot of Japanese visual novels, it just tends to fall into the anime tropes that, you're kind of seeing over and over again. So I don't know if Danganronpa does that differently. I mean, it has a setting that's very cliched, except with a twist. But it's just, I will read a lot, and I will read a visual novel if I like what I am reading and I like the story and I like the characters and the writing. So I find that a lot of them are kind of wanting, and they're all kind of very, immature in a way. And I don't mean that in an off-putting way. It's just like it's not mature writing. So I don't know if that's what you're necessarily looking for when you're playing Danganronpa, but I don't know if they achieve some sort of higher level of writing with the game.
They do not.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, look, any kind of visual novel game, you are lowering your standards for acceptable literature, right?
Yeah.
That's just kind of how it goes. That's the trade-off, right? Like, in order to interact with this book, the book has to be shittier. That's just kind of the trade-off there, right? So as long as you're comfortable with that going into any visual novel, then you're good, right? Because you are going to get those anime tropes. Like, all these Japanese visual novels are dense with anime tropes, right? And the writing is generally at best passable, depending on the game. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not good, but like average at best. Almost like reading a magazine article that's not like super long form and written by, a famous writer.
Yeah.
So as long as you are aware, and I don't mean you specifically, Ozzy, I mean just everyone, as long as you're aware that the writing standards are not going to be what you're used to when reading an actual novel written by a professional writer, then you're okay. Because that's the trade-off, right? Like, you interact, but the writing's not going to be as good, and all the characters are going to have gigantic eyes. That's it.
Yeah, I guess it's just not for me.
No, it's not for everyone, right?
Yeah.
And hey, and there are some that are like, so I saw Masa on Instagram picked up, and I'm gonna pronounce this once. He picked up Utawaweru Mono.
Utawaweru.
Yeah, I did.
I mean, honestly, has there ever been, like, I understand that that's the name of the game in Japan, and that's great, right? But like, you gotta rename that game here, or like. Well, I mean, for Danganronpa, what they did was the first one anyway, the sequels they didn't, but for Danganronpa, which is its own kind of weird sounding thing, they called it Trigger Happy Havoc.
Yeah.
And then Danganronpa in small print under it, which is what they should have done with that other game. So like, I actually played through the game that starts with a U, and it's Ozzy. It's like, it is like point perfect, exactly as you describe, right? Like, the writing's not so great, and it has all the anime tropes. It has like a lot of filler. Like, the story is very weirdly paced, but it was good enough to keep my attention for the whole first part and the sequel, you know, just because I was able to interact with it, and the story was broken up with this little Final Fantasy Tactics light kind of mini game.
Just one more question, Paul. Is Danganronpa onomatopoeia in Japanese, or is there an actual meaning behind it?
I have no idea, dude.
Okay. I'll research that after the episode, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I had not thought of it, nor had I.
Because I'm thinking
really
Trigger Happy Havoc, you know, kind of translates, because Danganronpa could be like the onomatopoeia of what sounds when you're like shooting bullets, like Danganronpa, you know, so maybe that's how they translated it. So anyways.
No, it's a good question. But yeah, like that's about it. Like, I've been playing a whole bunch of other games, but I know Arnie asked about that one specifically last time we chatted, so I figured I'd lead with that.
I heard there's or at least I've seen it. There's a PS4 re-release of, I think, the first 3 games. So I was sort of hoping to grab it on the PS4, because I think the Vita version is harder to find and probably going to become very expensive.
Maybe not. I don't know. It's so hard to say with these kind of games. What I will say is this: with Danganronpa and Tower, with those games, you want to play them on a handheld. I personally can't imagine playing a visual novel on a television.
Yeah.
Like, for me, these are games that I play in bed before going to sleep. And so if I have Danganronpa on the PS4, what I will do is I'll remote play it to the Vita.
Okay.
That's probably, like, that's just personally what I would do.
Yeah.
If you have the if you like relaxing on the couch, and maybe you want something that's a slower change of pace, then hey, you can do that too, right? I'm not telling you how to play your game. Just personally, I think that the experience is much better on the Vita.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, I actually have the first 2 games on the Vita, and I couldn't really imagine playing them on the big screen.
No, the big screen is for. It's like when you go to the movies, right? Like, and you're deciding what movie you want to see, and you tend. I tend, and most people I know tend to lean towards like the big action movies when they go to a theater, just because you get that experience on the big screen, right? That's just kind of how it goes. And something like an indie film, you know, maybe that's one that you rent and watch at home because it doesn't have the big effects that blow you away on a big screen. You know, something you can enjoy on a smaller scale. And so I feel it's the same thing with these kind of video games. You know, some of these games lend themselves better to a smaller portable format, and some of them lend themselves better to the big screen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Arnie, what have you been playing lately?
So I've been playing a couple things. What I'd like to do is take your example, Paul, from earlier of like, say it's your birthday and your mom takes you out and she's got Shining Resonance Refrain on one hand and Octopath Traveler on the other. You take those two games, you throw them on the ground, and you pick yourself up a copy of Yakuza 0 like a grown-ass man.
Hell yeah.
Because that's what I've been playing lately. It's really good. I think I'm about 50 hours in right now. And this is like the sort of epiphany I had about Yakuza, like as a whole, is that Yakuza, like on paper, should not be good. Like, if you really think about it, like mechanically, you just do the same stuff over and over and over and over again. But it has so much like character, and you can just tell that the people who made it really enjoyed making it, that it sort of gets you into it a lot more. And that's what I found. Like, stuff that I feel like in a lesser game I would have hated, I really enjoyed in Yakuza. Like, fighting is really fun, especially with the options of switching styles, and in this game having two characters makes fighting a whole lot more entertaining. But at the end of the day, it's the same stuff over and over and over again. But it doesn't get old for me. I remember,
well, for me, the fighting actually does get a little bit repetitive. I think that Yakuza 0 does a good job at mixing that up because of the different fighting styles.
Yeah.
But I think the reason why you go into Yakuza, at least for me, is one, the minigames, and two, the story and the characters. I think that the fighting is good. I think it's passable. But I do think it can get repetitive. And so that's not the main reason why I play Yakuza.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, about fighting, like Yakuza 0 is, I would say, at least so far out of all the Yakuza games that I've played, that has the best, like fighting mechanics, since you do have two characters and they all have, 4 different styles. Mm-hmm. But then, like, when you go from Yakuza 0 to Yakuza 6, where you have one character and only one style, then, yeah, I mean, I understand it that at some point that the game might start feeling a bit stale, as every fight basically plays out the same. And also, I think they have fixed it for Yakuza Kiwami 2, as it seems a bit more advanced, and also you can carry weapons again, which you couldn't do in Yakuza 6 for whatever reason. And one of the issues I had with Yakuza 6 was that, like, when you know, grab a bike and then you hit the enemy. I mean, of course, like, I understand in real life, if you hit someone with a fucking bike, I mean, the motherfucker is dead, basically.
Oh,
but like,
God, that's
I mean,
so good that you can use a bike as a weapon.
But like,
I
you use a motorcycle as a weapon.
Yeah, but like, it does insane damage, and then really often, like, these fights become just like you grab something and then you just, you know, beat the enemies down. Because it's way faster than, you know, just using your hands.
Yeah. And even beyond the fighting, like, specifically in 0, I haven't done Majima's side quest game of doing the cabarets yet, but Kiryu has a real estate game that basically boils down to go out, buy some shit, wait for all your other properties to make money, go back to your office, get all the money, upgrade stuff, go out, buy more stuff. And this thing takes hours to complete. Like I stopped cold during the story to do this whole thing, and it must have taken me, I want to say, maybe like 10 hours, or no, probably less than that, but there's story stuff in between. But some of these things get so expensive, you have to go back to your office like 2-3 times to be able to afford one thing out of like 8 for like four different areas. There's like, what, like 50 properties or something?
Were we not talking about grinding a few minutes ago?
Yeah, but that's the different thing, is that you don't have to do any of this, but I did the whole thing because it was enjoyable to me, because the characters that play opposite of Kiryu were like interesting and entertaining, and they also break it down to a system that's simple enough that it's as obtrusive as you want it to be. Like, it's as annoying as you let it be. You know what I mean? Like, you can choose to micromanage all these different things to like optimize all your like money collection stuff, or you can just throw people in that look good, and you don't get penalized very heavily one way or the other for not having like the optimum build for this stuff. And it goes by fast enough, and it lets you do stuff in between that keeps you engaged throughout the whole thing. Like if somebody implemented this thing in another RPG that wasn't as interesting, like didn't have as interesting of a world, and was more afraid to do like the crazy shit that Yakuza isn't afraid to do, this would be terrible. Like this would be like, I would have stopped playing another game that had this kind of mechanic in it. But Yakuza is like so off the wall and so unafraid to do these weird things that, like, even as somebody who really enjoys these games, like sometimes some of these sub stories, I'm like, this is fucking weird as shit. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're buying like porno mags for like exactly 7-year-olds. You're like, you know, you're like hanging out with like people who take like what was that one guy? Oh, they call him like what was his name? You know who I'm talking about, Masa? The guy who's like a sex pot, like he's basically running around
Mr.
naked
Libido.
like all the time.
Yeah, Mr. Libido.
Mr. Libido, that's right. And then like his one,
Jesus Christ,
his final
Are we
quest is
seriously
like,
talking about it?
yeah, his final quest is like, I've lost my mojo. I need you to buy me this drink that essentially like gets me up, so like I can go around and like fuck some more girls.
So you need to buy Viagra for him, basically.
Like to people who have not played the game and don't know what Libido looks like, he's a very unattractive bald dude in his boxers.
Yeah, who's basically just running around in like his underwear.
And he's dancing.
And maniacally like gyrates whenever you talk to him.
But yeah, I would
my God,
like,
that's awesome.
I have
It's
to
amazing.
mention something about, like that. You were talking about real estate, like mini games, sort of.
Yeah.
I actually, like, as someone who put around 100 hours into Yakuza 0, I actually did the bare minimum in that real estate game.
Yeah.
Because, like, what I didn't like about it was that, like, okay, so of course you sometimes have to go out and beat people up, but you aren't as involved as in like Machima's cabaret minigame.
Okay.
So
I haven't played that one yet. So
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, like I really like the minigame itself, like I mentioned it before on this podcast, but the minigame itself could easily be like its own game. And like there's also a storyline, and you have your rivals, and of course, you have these hostesses that you recruit. And yeah, I mean, the whole storyline is very interesting, and also, I mean, the mini game is just more fun than like Kiryu's real estate adventures.
Okay. I mean, honestly, just overall, I just like Majima a lot more than I like Kiryu. Story-wise, character-wise. Like, I like Kiryu, but Majima is just so much... Like, he kind of says what I'm thinking at certain points in this game, you know? He seems to be a lot more, like, with it than Kiryu is. Like, when things happen that are insane, he's just like, what the fuck was that? Like, he's very much, like in the player's shoes. Whereas Kiryu, I think, tends to play stuff off a little bit cooler. Because I think that's sort of the character that he's like the unfazed sort of guy.
That's actually, like, I went to Japan Expo earlier this month, and they had Daisuke Sato, who's the Yakuza producer, and he was actually talking about that, and he particularly mentioned that the reason why they have all these crazy side quests is that because Kiryu is like always so serious and so, reserved, and so that's why they want to put that character into like all these like very ridiculous situations.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's so many. There's like 100 different ones. There's a Michael Jackson ripoff character in this game one. That's amazing. And a Steven Spielberg one.
You're saying like everything I want to hear.
Yeah, it's so entertaining, but it's, there's just such a gamut. Oh, there's also and I think Masa had mentioned this in a previous episode, there's now a dedicated space where you go to to watch like softcore videos of like Japanese porn stars.
Guys, I'm not gonna lie. If someone walked in and heard this, I don't know what they would think.
I know, right?
I had a hot exclusive scoop, possibly. They actually had a panel with both Kuroda, who's the voice actor for Kiryu, and then Daisuke Sato, and there was actually a question, like on the big screen, like they were talking about the history of the series and so on. But they asked about like, okay, so like, is it possible that there's gonna be a Machima spin-off game? And it might happen. So all you Machima fans out there, because I know that Machima is one of the biggest fan favorites of the entire franchise. So yeah, he might actually get his own game.
Yeah,
cool.
But that's the thing I like about Yakuza is that all this stuff that we've talked about, like if all this sounds completely unappealing to anybody out there, you have to do exactly zero of it. You have to do none of this. This is all optional stuff. Like if you just want to go through the whole storyline and not really touch any of the side stories, you can do that. I think there maybe there's like one or two things that are required, but none of the sub-stories, I think, are required. You run across them randomly, and you can choose whether or not you want to do them. So it really does sort of open itself up to what you want. Like, however much of this game and this world you want to experience, like, that's how much you're going to get. And I really like that.
Masa, you were at Japan Expo, so I guess you could tell us a little bit more about what you played there.
Yeah, now that we've finished up our requisite Yakuza discussion for the episode.
No, actually not yet, because this is totally random, but it's still Yakuza related. But the other day I realized that I have been brainwashed by the series. Because lately, for whatever reason, I have subconsciously started saying, when I eat something really good. And I was like, yeah, where does that even come from? But then my girlfriend was like, that's Kiryu. I was like, what? Yeah, it is. Yeah, all that food grinding in Yakuza 6. Yeah, it finally got to me. I've been brainwashed.
That's awesome. Yeah, but anyway, Masa, let's talk about what you've been playing.
Yeah, okay, so first, before I get to those Japan Expo games, because, yeah, I mean, I was lucky, unlike Paul at E3. I actually got to play some games at Japan Expo. But nice. I don't want my girlfriend to dump or even worse, murder me. I have to mention one game that I actually was supposed to mention a couple of episodes ago. And it's a game that we have been playing together, and it's Yoshi's Woolly World on the Wii U. And how we ended up playing that game is that I actually was like, I don't know, a couple of months ago I got a bit wasted. And the next day I was very, very hungover. And I don't know if you guys drink or, you know, if you have ever been hungover. But yeah, it's
not... Yeah, like last week.
Yeah, I mean, it's not exactly like the state. Often, like, it's not the state to be in if you want to play video games. And I had, like, one of my worst hangovers in, I don't know, years. But then... Yeah, I was like, well, I don't want to, you know, waste a day off completely, just like lying on the couch and making weird sounds. So at some point I was like, well, better play something. And we picked up Yoshi's Woolly World, and I felt like that was the perfect, like, hangover game. As it's like... Yeah, we gotta do
their marketing campaign.
Can we just put that on the cover?
Yeah. Yeah, once we get like the like the Switch re-release of that game, yeah. The perfect hangover game. Yeah, gotta reach out for the new market because all the kids have already played the game, so yeah, we need to
gotta reach out to that underage drinking crowd.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I felt like that was the perfect game for the moment, as it's like very relaxing, especially like the early worlds. And of course, the art style is like gorgeous, and the music, like that game actually has a very good soundtrack. I was really surprised about it. It has, I don't know, it sounds quite unique for an intro game. It's kind of difficult to explain, but yeah, like go check it out on YouTube. It's really good. And also the game, Okay, so honestly, it's not the best like Nintendo platformer, but I feel like it's the perfect kind of summertime game. Like when you just want to relax and have some fun, play a game for like 30 minutes, do a few stages here and there, and like the co-op mode is a lot of fun. So so I had to get that off my chest before I move on to the Japan Expo games. Because I really don't want to disappoint my girlfriend again.
No, staying not divorced is important.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I guess the first game that I want to talk about is Mega Man 11. Have you guys...
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah, have you guys been following the game at all?
Yeah, I've seen some gameplay and it looks really good. I really like the art style of it.
Yeah,
the art style. Okay, so I'm not a big fan of like Mega Man himself. He looks a bit off, and especially like his animations are a bit weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, the game itself, man, like that's a legit Mega Man game. Like I think like I got to play like one stage. I don't remember like which one it was, but it really feels like a legit Mega Man game, and it has that classic feel to it. Like, I mean, of course, yeah, like the platforming, it feels, spot on. Of course, you have the Mega Buster, you can slide, and the game seems quite challenging as well. Like, I did fairly well, but like, I couldn't even beat the boss. But yeah, the most interesting thing about it is actually like there's this new gameplay mechanic, like you have
the gear
the
system,
double gear system, and I think that makes the game a bit easier because like before I got to play the game, I was watching another guy play the game, and he didn't know about that system, and he was basically playing it as a normal Mega Man game. And yeah, I mean, he struggled a lot, but I started using the double gear system right away, and it definitely like made the game easier, but like not too easy.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically you have the speed gear, and the speed gear is something that allows you to slow down time. Yeah, it's actually very important already, like in that stage that I played. And then you also have this power gear, which, of course, like it increases the power of your attacks. But of course, it's understandable that you can't abuse these gears. Like if you use them too much, they overheat and they weaken Mega Man and make the game a bit more difficult again. But I felt like it was it's a really interesting way to like modernize the game a little bit, while still keeping like the old school feel to it. So I was really surprised how much it actually feels like an old school Mega Man game, but like a modern version of the classic NES games.
The question is, Masa, how does this compare to Mighty Number 9?
You know what? Yeah.
I have not actually, despite owning Mighty Number 9, I have not played it, and my Wii U copy is still sealed.
Okay.
At least it looks a lot better.
Well, it looks better, but the thing with me is that I'm not crazy about the polygonal graphics in old school platformers. I prefer for them to be fully sprite based. But, it sounds like Mega Man 11 actually, achieves a good feel in terms of how the character controls, even though it's 2.5D in a way. So whenever I see 2.5D, I get like flashbacks to Mighty Number 9. So I that's why I was a little bit skeptical when I saw it. I thought, God, didn't they learn their lesson with Mighty Number 9? You would have thought that they wouldn't have gone down that route, but it seems like they're addressing that.
Yeah, to be honest, I wasn't like, when I saw like the first gameplay footage and the first like reveal trailers and stuff, I wasn't like that into the idea. And especially like the look of the game, I was a bit like, yeah, that 2.5D look just doesn't feel right. But when I actually got to play it and I saw the game in motion, like with my own eyes and stuff, yeah, I mean, it does work better than I expected. And it went from a game that, like, initially I was like, I'm it's a, easy pass. But now, if the price is right, I might pick it up.
So did you play any other game with 11 in its title?
Yes, I did, and that's Dragon Quest 11.
That's an oddly
Which is
specific
also,
question.
speaking of old school games. Dragon Quest 11. Okay, so I'm definitely not someone, I have not played the earlier Dragon Quest games outside of some spin-offs. Dragon Quest 11 still, I think it's gonna please, the old school Dragon Quest fans. That game, okay, we have talked about Final Fantasy 15 before, which is another, huge, Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest are the big, Square and Enix, or nowadays Square Enix titles. But it's interesting how Final Fantasy 15 and Final Fantasy as a franchise, it just, Square Enix is, they are trying to do, all these, different things with the series and trying to, modernize, RPGs in general and take them, to the next level, while Dragon Quest is as traditional as it gets. It feels so old school, but, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. For example, we talked about Octopath Traveler, which is an old school RPG, and, it's setting the world on fire. And I think Dragon Quest 11, it's probably not gonna be a huge hit in the West, but yeah, I think it's gonna become at least a cult hit here.
It'll make Dragon Quest fans happy, basically.
Yeah, exactly. One thing that felt a bit off about it is that okay, so the original Japanese release of the game is basically so old school that it doesn't even have any voice acting, which they added for the Western release. And you can sort of tell that it was added after the development of the game ended. Because especially during battles, you sometimes just get these random battle screams basically. And
oh, great! That's what I love.
Yeah, and it feels a bit off sometimes. Voice acting. Okay, so can't really say that much about voice acting because I actually I had to play with headphones and they were broken, so half the time, the sound would go mute completely, so couldn't hear anything. The music and the sound effects, especially the sound effects, they are straight from the older games. Especially that battle, when you finish a battle and there's that little jingle, yeah, it's the old one.
Yeah,
and the music sounds very old school too, and the character designs. It just looks like an old Dragon Quest game in HD.
I wonder why Dragon Quest escaped all the criticism that Final Fantasy did. Because for the longest time, all I ever heard about Final Fantasy was just oh, it's old style, and this game is not as good as it used to be, and blah blah blah. I guess maybe it's just kind of because in the West, Final Fantasy was more successful, so we noticed the backlash more than Dragon Quest. I've never heard anybody say anything.
Yeah, I would say that it's probably due to the fact that there's a bigger fan base for Final Fantasy, so there's a lot more disparate opinions than of Dragon Quest. I think Dragon Quest appealed to a very specific type of gamer.
Well, I feel like Dragon Quest, and I don't want to pigeonhole the Japanese market, but it seems to me that the Japanese are perfectly content with having the same thing over and over and over again. Oh, yeah. I don't know. It just seems to me like they don't put as much stock in, okay, I want a brand new experience. And Dragon Quest, everyone just wants the same level of comfort, it seems. It seems like in Japan it was so big that people just want to be taken back to when they were playing this as 10-year-olds on their NES. And it seems like that works just fine for the Japanese market, but I guess it also explains why Dragon Quest has never really blown up in the West. And I actually kind of disagree. I think that the problem with Final Fantasy was not that it did the same thing. I think actually it was that it just tried new things and those things were not appreciated by the fan base. I think that Final Fantasy 13 was the one that was the most lambasted, but that was because it was too linear. But I think people just want okay, just give me a Final Fantasy 7 remake, please. That's all I want. That's all I need.
Well,
and
gotta wait 4 more years for that one.
Yeah, and I feel like Dragon Quest, they don't really have that issue. It's just okay, we're just going to keep putting out, the same conventions over and over again. And I also see that with Yakuza, even though Yakuza tries to innovate, they can release a Yakuza game at the same rate that Call of Duty is released in the West, and people don't take it to task over there, because I think the Japanese are perfectly fine with that.
Yeah.
Well, I would say, okay, so with Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy, it's interesting how in Japan, Dragon Quest is actually a lot bigger than Final Fantasy, especially nowadays.
Yeah.
But in the West, Final Fantasy is the absolutely like the number one, like let's say hardcore RPG franchise. Because I mean, of course, Pokemon is more popular, but let's talk about like hardcore RPGs. But then, like in the West, I mean, Dragon Quest is a niche series basically, and it took forever to get like some of these games over here.
Yeah.
And I mean,
no, I think Ozzy hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah.
And I will say, just as my last word on it at least, I don't think, and this is not to say anything about Final Fantasy's sort of art direction or art style, but I think Akira Toriyama's art style and designs for Dragon Quest just have like a lasting appeal. They're just, I think they still hold up as well today as they did back then.
Yeah, they are somehow immune from criticism, and rightfully so. Like they're timeless, right? All right, Masa, anything else, or should we move on to the controllers?
Yeah, I still have one more, because we haven't talked about Yakuza enough. Okay, I'm not going to talk about Yakuza Kiwami 2. The demo is out right now. The game is coming out next month. So we will, without a doubt, talk about it like later. But there's another, like the third Yakuza-related game releasing this year will be Feast of the North Star Lost Paradise.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, another game I got to play. And, okay, so we have been talking about like how crazy Yakuza is. But this game might even be crazier than Yakuza. But yeah, Feast of the North Star, it's this like really old school. I actually don't remember when the original anime was released, in the 80s maybe?
I believe so.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it's very brutal, very violent, and I feel like they have translated that brutality and violence into the game very well, because yeah, you do have the classic "you are already dead" moments and heads exploding, and yeah, it's basically like Yakuza on steroids. The game actually uses the older Yakuza engine that they used for example, Kiwami 1 and 0. So it's not the Dragon engine. The game still looks very good, especially on PS4 Pro. That they had like the game running on that at the expo, and the battle system it's basically the same, but it's modified a little bit, as you can actually launch enemies into the air and then keep comboing them, which you can't do in Yakuza games, and also. You have these quick time events. Okay, you do have those in Yakuza games as well, but here it's far more frequent. As you get like these special attacks, you get this quick time event, which you have to press multiple different buttons like really fast to power up the move, and then heads will explode again.
Cool.
And then also what's interesting about the game is that they actually. I didn't get to play any mini-games, but they actually took a lot of mini-games, especially from Yakuza 0, and if I recall correctly, they actually have the cabaret mini-game from Yakuza 0 in Feast of the North Star. So, yeah, that's gonna be like, once again, for me, like, I can say goodbye to like maybe 20 or 30 hours of my life.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a minor miracle we're even getting the game at all, so I'm very excited to give it a shot.
But yeah, I gotta say,
100%.
like, Sega, not always the, the best video game company, but like, I think, like right now, what they have been doing with the Yakuza series, like, we are getting all these games, and we are starting to get them, like, faster and faster. We are most likely gonna get the, like, the remasters of 3, 4, and 5. Like, yeah, I gotta give props to Sega for, like, really, like, they are finally, like, pushing the series again in the West. Like, I think for the first time since, like, the first game, basically.
Yeah. Hey, man, I'm not going to complain about that. Like, obviously there are too many games for us to play, but variety is never a bad thing, yeah?
Spice of life and all that.
Exactly. Alrighty, so we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back with the remainder of our controller discussion, including a definitive, official ranking of controllers that cannot be disputed by anyone ever.
We gotta
say bye-bye to Ozzy.
No, we gotta eject Ozzy from the airlock.
Goodbye!
Yeah, exactly.
And so the next on our list is, listen, I don't think we're going to spend a whole ton of time talking about this because I know none of us have actually played this system. But the Phillips CDi is such an interesting thing. So basically, for those of you who haven't seen Phillips CDi, it was released in 1991. It was basically meant to be a multimedia machine. So it was not designed just for gaming, which explains so much.
Yep.
So many controllers released for this thing. Not all of them designed for games, but I know I've seen playthroughs of like Let's Plays of people playing CDi games with some of the controllers that were not designed for games. So you can play games on the CDi with any one of these controllers. Whether you like that or not is a completely different thing. But I found 4 main ones. The first one being the regular gamepad. Kind of looks like a Genesis pad. 3 perfectly diagonal buttons and a D-pad. It doesn't look great. The second one looks a little bit better. It's a 4-button gamepad with a D-pad. And if you'll notice, Paul, it has a thing in the middle where you can screw in a solid joystick. And I know for a fact that joystick is terrible. Because I've seen people play with it.
That's awesome.
It's basically just a solid piece of plastic that you shove in there. But the D-pad is not super like, it doesn't go down as much as other D-pads. So when you're using the joystick, it barely looks like it's moving, from what I remember. And then the 2 most hilarious ones, and I recommend that everybody go find them, are the wireless controller and the spoon controller. The spoon controller looks like a spoon. It's basically a handle and then a concave sort of circle that looks like a giant spoon.
Yeah, this is what I'm mixing ingredients in when I'm making soup.
Exactly. Like if you gave like your kid like a Fisher-Price like spoon like play set or like a kitchen play set, this would be a good substitute for that. It's hilarious looking. But you can play games with it. If you want to play Wand of Gamelon with your spoon controller, go right the fuck ahead. Because that's an option. And then the wireless controller, which I was super surprised by because I think that this might be early wireless. Like I know Super Nintendo had a wireless controller. And Genesis may have. Because they were doing the infrared wireless. But this one is straight up just... for like PowerPoint presentations and stuff. It's a remote control with I think like 8 buttons, and then on top it has a joystick, like a tiny joystick with 4 buttons around it. And you can play games with this thing, but I imagine it would be super uncomfortable because I think you can only hold it in one hand. So you'd have to like move and also press the buttons around the joystick with your other finger. So I don't know how that would work at all.
Brilliant design.
Yeah. But that's basically the CDi. Basically put on this list so that I have a chance to talk about the spoon controller, because when else was I going to do that?
Dude, this system, it's like the Wild West of design. You know, people, I don't know what the deal is with licensing for this system and so on and so forth, but the fact that you have these 4 wildly different controllers, like, how does that even happen? Like, there's no consistency. It's madness.
Yeah, like they don't follow any kind of pattern. They are like,
absolutely
completely
not.
different.
And as far as I can tell, and I haven't looked into it a whole lot, but I'm kind of tempted to now, is I don't know what controller you would get
with the system. Like, I don't know if any of these are standard or if you could buy different bundles that had different controllers in them.
Maybe
so I really haven't.
Maybe the console just came with like one of those, like randomly.
Yeah, I'm pretty
like,
sure. I don't think it comes with like anything more than one.
Damn it.
Like you open it and you're like, "Fuck, it's the spoon."
Yeah. There goes my $700.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But moving on from the Phillips CDi, we finally come back all the way around to Atari. With the Atari Jaguar. This is an interesting controller because I have met people who do like this controller. If you've never seen an Atari Jaguar controller, it's basically one gigantic lump of plastic that somebody stuck buttons and a D-pad to. Like, it's a solid hunk of plastic. But basically it's, again, D-pad and 3 buttons on top. And then on the bottom, the good old number pad making its triumphant return after 13 years dormant.
But yeah, I gotta say, it's in some, fucked up way, it's kind of cool that this is basically like the modern version of the Atari 5200 controller.
It really is. Like, I don't know why Atari was like, you know what really worked back in the day? Overlays and number pads. And we're gonna bring those fucking back. Because that's what they did. They brought out a controller that has number pads and overlays. And, like, the thing that really blows my mind about this is that, like, this existed in the same time frame as Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis. Like, could not be more different controller-wise than the Atari Jaguar system. And the other thing that I think is really cool is if you look at it, if you just cut that controller in half, you'd probably have, like, a decent-looking controller. Like, if it was just the D-pad and the 3 buttons, it would probably look okay. Like, it kind of looks like the tiny, hoary PlayStation 4 controller.
Yeah.
But, like, 3 times the size of that.
I would love to know, and having never owned a Jaguar or played any Jaguar games, actually.
Yeah.
I would love to know if there are any games that really make use of those 12 buttons. I would like to know. I would like to know, like, what kind of game made use of those, because I would have to assume that there are none, right? Just based on contemporary game design, like, what game would be using all those buttons? I have the picture of that controller in front of me. I've been shaking my head for like a full minute.
Well, and here's the thing. So the original Jaguar controller, 3 buttons, 12 number pads, right?
Yeah.
So 15 buttons and a D-pad. Well, actually 17 buttons if you count the start and select button and the D-pad, right? Jaguar then releases a Pro controller, which I'd never heard of before I started doing research for this. And what do you think the Pro controller did was add 3 more buttons on top of the 17 buttons. So now we're up to 20 buttons. And I believe, I don't remember, I think those top 3 buttons sort of take functionality from some of the number pad buttons. So we're up to 20 buttons, and I can see, just from looking at this picture, that there do seem to be some shoulder buttons. So there's at least 22 buttons on this Jaguar Pro controller.
So yeah, now, like,
enough.
give that controller to a total video game noob.
Oh my
exactly.
Lord.
Yeah.
Like, how do you... Like, I don't understand what the thinking behind this is. Like, when would I ever need to play a video game? Like, you know what? I bet this would be a great RTS controller. You can
probably,
key map, like, all the things to the 20-some buttons on this controller.
That would be the one use. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, to play StarCraft 64 on my on my Atari Jaguar Pro controller.
Yeah. Hey man, you know what? Props to you for figuring out a use, because I was completely blank on it.
All right. So now that we're done making fun of the Jaguar, time to move on to the Panasonic 3DO, which, alongside the Phillips CDi, might be the most confusing video game console in terms of controllers. So Panasonic also wanted to make sort of a multimedia machine, but they licensed out the design of the 3DO. So they let other companies make 3DOs. They were not the only company. So there's Panasonic, there's Gold Star, and there was Sanyo. Those are the 3 companies that I recall through my research that actually made 3DOs, and I think all of them look slightly different. But the controllers, you know, much like we're seeing, I think it's funny how, like, I think the Sega Genesis was like the dominant mold for controllers. All these controllers have 3 buttons and a D-pad. None of them really seem to be doing what the Super Nintendo was doing. And that could be, I think that might have resulted from, I think the Sega Genesis actually outsold the Super Nintendo during the 16-bit generation. So maybe that's why they sort of modeled their controllers after Genesis, because it was so popular.
That would make sense to me. And I don't think we need to spend too much time on this one, but
no.
It looks pretty conventional. The one feature on it that was fantastic, and obviously it's obsolete today, but the fact that you had one controller port, but the other controller ports were in each controller. So you could kind of daisy chain the controllers.
All your controllers together.
Yeah, and like, man, that was fantastic. Like, you know, as far as like spacing in the room and so on and so forth. Yeah, no, great idea. Probably the only real notable feature here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, just looking at it, if you ever look at a 3DO controller, you can tell that this was not just meant to be a video game console, because the start and select button aren't start and select. They're play and pause and they're stop. So they knew that people were going to use this thing for other, or at least they wanted people to use this for other things besides video games.
Yeah.
So moving right along, PlayStation, PS1, 1994. We know how Paul feels about the original PS1 controller, and I have to agree, it looks kind of sad, honestly. Like, looking at it, like looking back at it, I never had an original one. I always used the DualShock. The original one looks kind of sad.
Yeah, I wasn't a big fan of the original one either. It was just weird. And it shouldn't, like, that shouldn't make sense, only because I love the DualShock. The DualShock is much more fondly remembered, I think. But it's just because those 2 analog sticks made such a huge difference. It, like, counterintuitively so. Like, it shouldn't make that much of a difference. It's just an update on the design. But, the original one, I wasn't a big fan.
That makes all the difference sometimes. It's just that form factor. I also think they shortened the grips on the DualShock, and they made it like a little bit fuller, so it's nice. It's got a nicer feel when you hold it. I
think you might be right. I haven't sat down and compared the two. Unfortunately, I don't have an old one anymore. I've only got DualShocks for the PS1 nowadays, but that would make sense. It just feels more solid. The original PlayStation controller, like, it was very kind of, I don't want to call it flimsy. It's solid, but it's also quite light. Whereas the DualShock controller, it feels more substantial.
Yeah. Anything you want to add on the PS1 controller, Masa?
I don't actually remember the last time I used the original one. I think it was like probably like, in the, mid to late 90s, but I definitely wouldn't go back to that one. So if I ever, use my PS1, I'm using the DualShock one.
Yep. And I think I want to say, before we move on, that this seems like the first time an updated controller sort of overtook the original design. At least as far as I can remember. Maybe with the Genesis 6 button. But I don't know. People still remember the 3-button controller fondly. I think this one is much more like noticeable that people just don't use the original one anymore.
No, not at all.
And then we have this might be the most divisive control on this list, is the N64 controller. Some people really fucking love this controller.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan.
I don't know, man. Some people like liver.
I'm not a huge fan, but I could see the appeal. I mean, it's laid out nicely. The 3-prong design just does not work for me. It just doesn't. It just makes me confused as to how I want to hold this every time I go to play it. Lot of buttons, much. It seems more cluttered than the Super Nintendo controller, like a lot more so, at least to me. But I think the big thing with the N64 controller is how modular it was. They had attachable rumble pack, attachable memory card, Pokemon transfer pack. Like, they had all this stuff that you could sort of plug into it to get other effects. And that's not even counting, like, the microphone for Hey You Pikachu and all sorts of other stuff you could do with it.
Yeah.
But yeah. So N64, all around, decent controller. Here's one that I did really want to talk about because Paul's here, and I have no experience with Saturn. So Saturn controllers. I'm assuming that the first one I have here is the original release. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, and so it just looks like a regular fight pad. Honestly, has sort of the same design as the Genesis 6 button, but with a different form factor. But the buttons are all laid out the same. Does it have triggers? I can't tell from here.
I don't. Yeah, I think it does. They're like little.
Okay.
They're little clickable kind of buttons on the top. They don't necessarily protrude very far, but they're there.
Yeah.
The main difference with this one is the D-pad. The D-pad is this kind of concave. It's hard to tell from this picture, but it's not a conventional D-pad where you have the cross kind of popping up. It's more of a sunken, like a sunken kind of circle / cross.
Okay. Interesting. Honestly, it reminds me of like all the fighting game pads they make now. Like, they have sort of the same shape, kind of.
Yes.
So it's interesting. I mean, that's what it seems like the Saturn was really good at, was 2D and like fighting games and stuff like that.
Yeah, for which the second gen control right below in our pictures here.
Yeah.
That, to me, that's like the ultimate for fighting games. It just had it had the nice D-pad, it had the 6-button layout, and
it looks super cool.
What's that?
It looks extremely cool.
Yeah, it
the
just
one on
looks
the
good.
far right.
The other one for the Saturn is the analog, the 3D analog pad.
Oh, the 3D analog pad, got you.
Yeah,
the
so it's got the analog
one.
stick on top, and then the digital one below it, the conventional one.
Oh, okay.
Looks weird because it's just a big circle.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I was gonna say that it looks kind of uncomfortable, like kind of unwieldy, but it seems like people really like it.
And I love it. It's
interesting.
I don't get it. Like, I even have, like, I'm almost embarrassed to talk about how much I like it because it just looks really weird.
Yeah,
But
it does.
it is actually really comfortable. And again, for fighting games, it was fantastic because you can see it's the same D-pad that they use on the other 6-button one. So for fighting games, it was basically the same as the other one.
Okay. Interesting. I've definitely heard like really good things about it, but I've never held one in person. And then these next ones, I'm gonna sort of cruise through because I feel like most people have used them, and I feel like we're gonna talk a bit more about them at the end when we sort of give our top 5. But you have the DualShock 2, which honestly has to be one of the, well, definitely the most used, if not one of the most loved video game controls of all time. DualShock 2 is awesome. It's basically DualShock 1, but better.
Yep.
So there's not much I can say about it. Like, Sony is very much like, we're going to keep what works and sort of make small adjustments over time. You know what I mean? Like, DualShock 1, DualShock 2, DualShock 3, all really very similar form factor. DualShock 4 is probably the biggest change in form factor to Sony's controllers that they've ever had.
Yeah, I agree.
So DualShock 2, awesome. Do you agree, Masa? Do you like the DualShock 2?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so nowadays I would say, like, after getting used to the, DualShock 4, it's a bit difficult because, I mean, the form factor is, it's a bit bigger than the previous DualShock ones. So nowadays, like, if I play something on the PS2, PS3, it does feel a bit smaller. So, but yeah, I mean, I would say when it comes to that generation, like PS2, GameCube, Xbox, Dreamcast, if you ask me like what's my favorite one, I would go with the DualShock 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the next one I have on the list is the GameCube, and here's the thing: if Sony's very much about small incremental changes over time, Nintendo is about scrapping everything and making a brand new controller every single time. from the NES to the Super NES, from the Super NES to the N64, from the N64 to the GameCube, these controllers do not look anything alike, and they control completely differently every single time. I will say, the GameCube's not my favorite controller, but it is the controller that did single analog stick control schemes the best. Usually, I'm all about, if a game has an analog stick, it better have two, but the GameCube controller is very good for a controller that only has one analog stick on it.
Interesting. I'd never really considered that.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting point, though.
Yeah. It's my favorite. And then, of course, the Wavebird, which is, it's probably like the most fondly remembered wireless controller from this generation.
I still use mine.
People fucking love the Wavebird.
Yeah.
I have one, and I don't have the receiver for it, so I've never been able to actually play with it.
I don't have one, but I've always wanted to have one. And I would say...
Holding it...
Yeah, and I would say that when it comes to like Nintendo's, like let's say these more unique controllers, because nowadays you have the Wii, the Wii U, the Switch Pro controllers, like they follow, like, I mean, they are more like, let's say, they were obviously influenced by the Xbox 360 controller. But when it comes to these like unique Nintendo ones, I would say that GameCube is probably my favorite.
Yeah, GameCube, great controller. It's one of these, again, that just seems like it wouldn't work when you look at it, and then when you actually hold it and start playing it, it really does. Like the fact that the A button is gigantic next to the tiny B button, the way that X and Y buttons are laid out, like it's super weird. It looks like it's gonna be terrible, but it actually does really work very well, at least for the games that were put out on it.
Yeah, very easy to press two buttons simultaneously with your thumb because of that gigantic A button.
Yeah. And then the other big change, the C stick instead of the C buttons, which I like. The C buttons were not great. So I'm glad to see that one. OG Xbox. So we got the big Duke, which I've only used once, and I actually found it pretty comfortable. And I don't have gigantic hands. I don't think that I could use it for like long play sessions. But I did not find it as horrible as other people seem to find it. Although Hyperkin just put out that new Duke controller that now everybody wants, so maybe nobody ever actually hated the Duke in the first place.
I strongly disliked it.
Yeah, same here. Like these are like there's two, like this generation. I think DualShock 2 and the GameCube one. Those were excellent, but then you had the massive ones, Xbox and Dreamcast, and yeah, I never liked the form factor of those, and they just, well, yeah, the Duke is just massive, but the Dreamcast one, which we will probably like talk more in a minute, but like it, at least to me, it feels so uncomfortable, and it's still quite big.
Yeah, I agree, and I mean we can segue right to the Dreamcast, like that Dreamcast controller, man, oh man, like if not for the VMU, which is a really, really cool peripheral and a great idea. If not for that VMU, that controller design would just be awful. Awful.
I really dislike the Dreamcast. It's too angular. Again, one analog stick, but not as good as the GameCube's analog stick. You know, people really seem to love the Dreamcast controller. Like the N64, it's like a love it or hate it sort of thing. Oh. You either really like it or you dislike it. I'm not a fan of the Dreamcast controller, even with the VMU. Like, I like the idea of the VMU, but it doesn't do enough for me to sort of redeem the controller.
No, it doesn't do enough, no.
Yeah.
And also,
the fight stick on the Dreamcast is apparently like one of the best fight sticks, though, is what I've heard.
Yeah, really good.
But yeah, I gotta say, like, one thing that always bothered me about the Dreamcast controller is that the controller wire or the cable, it
comes out of the bottom.
Yeah, comes out. Yeah, I mean,
yep,
unconscionable.
I mean, that has to be. I mean, I'm sure it's because of the VMU, which is placed on the top of the controller, but still, it feels so wrong.
Yeah, it feels super incorrect. And they removed 2 buttons from the face, so now it's only 4 buttons in an era where 2D fighting games were becoming less popular. You know, they weren't what they used to be. But, like, what are you gaining by removing those 2 buttons? It's madness. Because it's like,
Yeah.
there's only 2 trigger buttons on the back. There aren't 4
Yeah.
shoulder buttons, right? You have 2 trigger buttons and 4 on the face. So you're removing buttons during a time where games are designed with, the 8 buttons in mind, which were becoming more conventional. Man, it's baffling. I can't look at that thing.
I may not look so hot to you, but you should see yourselves through my eyes. Creepy. My name is Seaman. You don't know me, but you will. Some say my amphibious nature makes me seem odd. That's because I'm part fish. I must be cold, insensitive, and creepy. I beg to differ. You may not think I'm attractive, but your wife will. Grrr.
All right. So in order to save Paul some night terrors, we'll move on to the PlayStation 3 controller. Like I said, DualShock 3, much like the DualShock 2, wireless. In the era of wireless gaming, finally getting some good wireless controllers. The original was the 6-axis model. Sony's new sort of motion control scheme that crashed and burned for the better, I would say.
Yep.
It was never, even the games that used it did not use it well. But Sony would eventually come back to Move controls thanks to the Wii with their PS Move, which a lot of people have described as looking sort of phallic sexual objects. That's the description I've heard most often associated with it.
Yeah, it definitely looks like a sex toy.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I've never used a Move. It looks interesting. I think that's the PSVR standard controller now, so they've clearly given it life outside of the PS3. I do want to stop and talk about the Xbox 360 controller for a second because, spoiler alert, it's probably my favorite controller of all time.
Yeah.
Added bumpers to the triggers, which the original Xbox did not have. But much like the Xbox, the offset joysticks are revolutionary. I never thought that I would sort of get it, and then when I started playing it, I can't... Like, playing PS4 games is a little weird to me now because the joysticks aren't offset, and I like that so much better.
I agree that the Xbox 360 controller absolutely nailed it. Like, I love that controller. I don't really... I switched a lot from, from the offset analog to the analog next to each other. I play a lot of different systems. Frankly, I don't really notice, and I don't have a preference. I don't get it personally. The reason I like the 360 pad is that it just feels really good.
Yeah. Well, and it's clean. It's like not super cumbersome. It's a good size. Like, it does what it needs to right. And I think Microsoft, Sony's the let's take our time. Nintendo's the, everything's new every single time. I think Microsoft is more of a let's just make it as sleek looking as we can. Like let's take this design and just continually sort of make it look better. Not necessarily play better, but let's make it look cooler while maintaining like the stuff that works.
Yeah.
Of course, the Kinect, I don't think we need to talk about the Kinect.
Nope.
It spies on you. It's fucking... They wanted to make it like... original Xbox Ones were voice controlled. You could voice control with Kinect. And I was like, that's the creepiest shit I've ever seen. Like, I don't want to do that.
Dude, 100%. I go to my sister's place, and my sister and my brother-in-law, they'll talk to their Xbox One, and I just don't get it. They like that functionality. I'm creeped out. I'm talking to a piece of metal. It's really weird.
Yeah. So Nintendo Wii. Obviously, I don't think we need to say much about this. Everybody knows Nintendo Wii. Everybody thought it was stupid, and then it sold 100+ million consoles. So I guess who's really stupid, right? Like, if it looks stupid but it works, it's not stupid. Is that how the saying goes?
Well, yeah.
Pretty
one
much.
thing that I have to mention about it, so personally for me, I'm a huge Nintendo fanboy, but like the Wii Remote, right from the get-go was a huge turn-off for me, and one of the biggest reasons why I actually got a Wii very late. I believe it was maybe in 2011, so like very late to the life cycle. And like nowadays, I mean, I do, use the Wii remotes for some Wii U games, but like I only use them when I have to. But like the most ridiculous thing about those is that okay, yeah, sure, you have the like the classic, like the retro style classic controller, and also the Wii Pro, which are, I mean, I like them both. Especially the Pro one is, I mean, it's decent. But the ridiculous thing here is that they don't work without the remote. Like you have to, have to attach the fucking
classic controller
to the
into
Wii
the
remote, and
Yep.
I just don't understand it.
Yep. Well, because they didn't make them wireless.
Yeah.
The way they become wireless is by plugging them into the Wiimote. And it's weird because you need the Wiimote to like navigate the menus and stuff. They didn't make it so you could, like, even when you use a GameCube controller, you still need the Wiimote. So that's annoying.
Yes, that's what I find to be the most weird part. Is that you still need to navigate with the Wiimote and then change to the other controller. The plugging into the Wiimote I don't find too bad. But yeah, like the switching between is like, it's, I don't know, it's just cumbersome.
Yeah, and I mean, the original Wiimotes apparently weren't super great. Wii Motion Plus really like smoothed out a lot of the wrinkles with that. I think the concession that Nintendo made that I thought was really smart is a lot of Wii games, and not all of them, but a lot of them do allow classic controller support. A lot of them do allow GameCube controller support. So, they forced motion controls on people without forcing motion controls on people, pretty much.
Yeah, it's kind of like with the Wii U and the Wii U gamepad. Okay.
Which is the next thing we're moving on.
Yeah.
So tell us, Masa. Tell us about the Wii U.
I do have to say that there's some games that actually like the gamepad does enhance the the whole experience. Like for example, Rayman Legends, it's better with the gamepad. But it's absolute bullshit that you are forced to use the gamepad to like start the actual system, and the system won't even work without the gamepad. And also, to make things even worse, okay, so yeah, sure, I mean, it's a very big tablet-like controller. It's very easy to break, and also, it's just so annoying, like, even if you, like, I mean, I have the Pro controller, and I use it, like, I don't know, 99% of the time, but, I mean, yeah, with that, like, I still have to, like, use the gamepad, which has a very bad battery life. It's, I don't know, maybe it feels like, it's definitely less than 3 hours. But, like, it has often happened to me that I'm like, yeah, I just want to play something on the Wii U, and then I'm like, fuck, the gamepad is dead. Fuck, now I gotta charge it, and then, by the time it's done, charging, I'm like playing something on the PS4 or something, and I've forgotten all about the Wii U, so yeah.
Here's the thing about the Wii U. If the Switch did not exist, I would probably really like this gamepad, if nothing else, just for the ambition of it. The fact that you could remote play some stuff, even though, of course, there's like range issues, you can't just take it wherever you want. But that sort of functionality seemed really cool to me at the time. Now that the Switch exists, it's just not as good.
Nope.
Well, it's what the Switch is supposed to be, right?
Yeah, it's the proto Switch, right? So it's, if nothing else, it's the step that got us to the Switch. But I've held the gamepad a couple of times. Like Masa said, it's not super comfortable, especially if you're playing for a long time. But it wasn't terrible. There's definitely been worse controllers I've held than this. Just very big by nature of having the screen and all this other stuff on it. Never use the Pro controller, and that seems to be the thing that people swear by. Like, if you're gonna play a Wii U, you need a Wii U Pro controller.
Yeah, absolutely, and I feel like it's the same thing with the Switch nowadays. Like, okay, sure, like the Joy-Cons, like, the Joy-Con grip isn't horrible, but, I mean, it works, like, for example, a lot of times when I, go out, I just bring the grip with me instead of the Pro controller, and I mean, I mean, it's fine. But definitely with both the Switch and the Wii U, the Pro controller is the way to go. And personally for me, like those two are like the only ones that are really like challenging the Xbox 360 one.
Yeah. It does, and this is going to be weird. It really bothers me that on the Wii U Pro controller, the analog sticks are on top of everything else. Just visually, it makes me uncomfortable. So now we're finally at the current gen Xbox One, Xbox One S, Xbox One X, 2013, 2016, 2017, respectively, which just made me realize how many fucking Xbox Ones have come out. Almost identical to the 360 controller. The biggest difference I found was the triggers. Both the bumpers and the actual triggers felt different. The form factor, like I said, just looks cooler. It's a little more angular. The finishes, like the color finishes on it, look a lot nicer. But with this, I think it's just about customizability. I think Xbox really wants you to be like, whatever controller you want, you can make it.
Yep.
I included a link to the Xbox Design Lab. You can go onto the Xbox Design Lab and design your own controller. And I tried it thinking like it would just be like sort of a simple thing. No, you can change, trigger color, face color, analog stick color, button color, start and select button color, D-pad color, like everything. You could put pictures on it. You can pick like your favorite sports team. You can engrave it with like a 16-letter message or whatever you want. Like, I find that really cool. Like, it has nothing to do with like functionality, but that is super cool to me.
I think it's a huge selling feature.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't have an Xbox One, but like to be honest, as someone who posts like controller pictures on Instagram every freaking day, basically, like I'm like, I want one, like just for the controllers. Like there's not a whole lot of Xbox One games that I actually want to play, but like, I mean, the controller is, it looks amazing, and the whole thing that you just explained, it's like, why aren't Nintendo and Sony doing this?
It's absolutely brilliant.
Absolutely.
Like my sister and brother-in-law each have controllers that they customized, and they look great, and they're unique, and they feel great. Like, Microsoft got a lot of stuff wrong in this last generation, but boy, oh boy, did they ever nail those controllers.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing too, is like, it doesn't cost any more. Like, it costs $60. Like, no matter what you do, it costs $60. I think the engraving costs like $10 extra or something.
Yeah.
But it doesn't cost you anything more, and you get it professionally done by like them.
Yeah.
It's not like, a third party thing, which, I mean, look awesome a lot of the time, but this is like official sort of Xbox design controller. And I think this is basically the epitome of something that we didn't really talk about, but that started with the N64 and the PlayStation 1, of just having like all these crazy colors and like crazy controller designs that people like. Like, Xbox has always been good from like the 360 to now, of like just special edition controllers, custom colors. Like, they love doing that shit.
Yeah, and we eat it up.
Yep. And then a quick mention of the Xbox Elite controller. I've never used one of these. It looks fucking crazy. People swear by it. It's $150, so it's probably the most expensive controller you'll own outside of like those crazy hoary controllers that are super hard to find, or maybe like a really good fight stick. But it's completely modular. You can change out the analog sticks, you can change out the D-pad, you can change out, it has extra paddles on the back with hair trigger controllers for like FPSs and stuff like that, so it makes you shoot quicker. It's nuts.
It's easily the best controller available right now, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I would never pay that much money for it.
Yeah, exactly. That's the one barrier to entry is the cost, but all I've heard is that it's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite crazy that, I mean, it's $150, and I think that on sale you can actually get an Xbox One S for that same price.
That's nuts.
Bonkers.
Like, that's crazy. Yeah. PS4 Pro, PS4 and PS4 Pro, DualShock 4. I don't think there's been any big revisions to the DualShock since it came out. like Masa said at the beginning of the episode, biggest addition is the touchpad, which is not being used a whole lot. Aside from that, similar form factor. They changed the joysticks, the joystick tops a little bit, and the triggers, I think, are the biggest change. They're actually triggers now. They're not just buttons.
Yeah.
So the R2, L2 are actually triggers. They feel really satisfying to, like, use and, like, hit. But, solid build. My only problem with this freaking controller is the battery life. The battery life, at least for the ones I've used, is terrible.
Garbage.
Yeah, it's I don't know, 5 hours if you're lucky.
Yeah, especially going back to the PS3 controller, because the PS3, the DualShock 3 battery life is insane. Like, It lasts forever.
And the same thing with the Switch Pro. I put like 150 hours into Breath of the Wild, and I think I only charged my controller maybe twice? Like 3 times max.
That's insane.
It's like, it's like 50
crazy.
hours on like one charging. So, yeah, with DualShock 4, I mean, like whenever I stop using my PS4, I have to, start charging the controller.
Like make sure you charge it.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, they've gotten into customizing the colors and all that stuff. Some of these PS4 controllers look pretty fucking sweet, especially the PS4 Anniversary looks really, really cool. There's a crystal one that's see-through that looks fucking awesome. So they've got a bunch that look really awesome. And then PSVR, big old fucking VR thing you put on your head, and then a couple Move controllers and a camera. People seem to from what I've seen, it controls pretty well. VR is just not my thing, especially not at the price point that they want me to get into it.
You can, now that it's been out for a while, it's pretty easy to find them on local buy-in sells.
Okay.
Like a lot of people who were like, wow, VR, and then they got it, and then, wow, this isn't very good, and then they want to sell it. It's fairly easy to find now for a reasonable price, and I feel like the software is finally starting to come around that supports it pretty well.
Resident Evil 7 looked really freaking cool.
Yeah, Resident Evil 7. I'm such a nerd. Like, Star Trek Bridge Crew.
I've heard that game is super fun,
dude.
Especially if you like play it with other people.
Yeah, you have to play with other people. If you play it by yourself, then it's kind of sad. But
yeah,
no, it's okay, because you train. You do training missions so that you can not be incompetent when you're playing with other people. Okay. But yeah, like as a game, not good at all. As multiplayer,
an immersive experience.
What's that?
As an immersive experience.
Yes, as a multiplayer VR experience. If you're a Star Trek fan, you better get on it.
I've heard like a lot of hype about that game for that exact reason. Like, this is what we've wanted since we started watching Star Trek.
Yeah, exactly. Again, I
be
can't,
a part of the crew.
I can't stress it enough. As a game, not good. But it doesn't matter.
But they also have Skyrim for it, so that's really, what more do you need, right?
True enough. Wrap it up with the Switch.
And now, come down to the big old finale with the Nintendo Switch. Here's the thing about the Switch that I really like. When I talk about the Switch, at first I was like, oh yeah, the pad and like the mobile thing and like handheld and blah blah, and I was like, actually, if we're talking about controllers, we're really only talking about the Joy-Cons. But the Joy-Cons are still really cool, especially in the design, because it's designed to be used as a controller in like 4 different kinds of ways. You can use it as a single Joy-Con. You can use it as both Joy-Cons, just disconnected for like motion control. You can use it on the tablet in handheld mode, and you can use it on the grip as like just a regular controller. So that's really cool to me, the fact that like they thought of every combination you could want to do with these things.
Yes.
And I gotta say, like one of the things that, so when Nintendo, like when they basically revealed the console, like they were talking about HD Rumble for ages. And that's one thing, like when I was playing 1-2 Switch, one of those 3 times that I actually played that game, like HD Rumble really is, so it has not been utilized in a whole lot of games so far, but it's definitely like the best Rumble effect that I've ever, experienced with any controller. It's so different, and I really hope that we will start getting games that use it. I mean, it's a bit gimmicky, but still. And yeah, it's quite crazy how high tech and like the technology in Joy-Cons, I mean, it explains why they are so expensive. Like a pair of Joy-Cons is like, 80 euros. So, I mean, they are expensive, but yeah, they have some really interesting technology, and I believe that Nintendo hasn't even revealed everything yet. Kind of like, they've released, Labo, and even that thing uses Joy-Cons in like very interesting ways that people...
I didn't even think of that, you're right.
Yeah, people didn't even think that it was possible to use Joy-Cons like that, so... okay, so not my preferred way to play on the Switch, but yeah, Joy-Cons are definitely like, I do like them a lot more than, for example, the Wii remote.
Yeah. It's definitely the most revolutionary design we've seen since the Wii Remote, and it's definitely superior. I'm impressed with it, and with that said, my expectation is that the vast majority of Switch games will not even come close to using their full functionality. We're just gonna get conventional kind of game design, which is okay.
Yeah, exactly.
That's fine. And colors, so many colors.
Yep.
I also really love that you can, sort of, Joy-Cons aren't paired to each other in a way that you can't just use any two Joy-Cons on your Switch. So whatever color combination you want to come up with, as long as you got a left and a right one, obviously, they'll let you do. And I think that's really cool.
I bet we have 4 different pairs, and I mean, I really love mixing and matching those colors.
Yeah. But the little I've used it, the joysticks are really solid. I really like them. They're smaller than I think other joysticks. At least they felt smaller to me. But really good. Just for controlling. Very nice, like fluid controls. The triggers are nice. The buttons was hit or miss for me. Some of them felt really good. Some other ones I've used feel a little bit more squishy, like not as solid. Or not as clicky as like other buttons. But overall, like really cool. Even like when I used it as like a single Joy-Con, I thought it was going to be really uncomfortable to hold it with both hands. But it really worked, and I got to play some like Mario Kart, and it was super cool.
Cool.
But yeah, it's definitely like one big issue, actually with both the Joy-Cons and also with the Pro Controller. First of all, the Pro one doesn't have a very good D-pad. I mean, yeah, I've been playing Ultra Street Fighter 2 with the Pro Controller, and it's true, but a lot of people have been saying that the D-pad, it just isn't as good as the previous Nintendo D-pads. And then you have the Joy-Cons, and you don't really even have a real D-pad, because you only have like 4 separate buttons, which basically like mirror the X, A, B, and Y like face buttons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
1, 2, switch!
And so just to round out, I think originally I'd wanted to see if we could come to a consensus on the top 5 best controllers. But just in talking about these, I can tell that's not going to happen anytime soon. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to have us go around and just give our like quick, maybe top 5, at least top 2 or 3 favorite controllers, and at least one like least favorite controller. So Paul, hit me with your favorite controllers.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll give you 2. I'll give you modern and retro. My favorite controller retro would be the Sega Saturn 6-button, the second gen one.
The 3D pad?
What's that?
The 3D pad?
That one too. To me, they're interchangeable. Okay. I'm just as happy using the 3D one as I am using the regular one, even though they look wildly different. Just because the button and D-pad components are the same. And it just hasn't, in my opinion, hasn't gotten any better than that. For modern, like, I don't have an Xbox One, but that controller is really nice, and it feels really good. I would give that, the title to that one. And least favorite, man, it's hard to give a least favorite one without going into all the crazy third-party garbage that's come out over the years.
Of course.
But I mean, for stock, come on, man, the Jaguar.
Dream. It's funny. I thought you were gonna say the Dreamcast.
The Dreamcast is my most disappointing controller because I really, I really like the Dreamcast and I really like the Dreamcast games, and that controller single-handedly ruined Virtual On Oratorio Tangram for the Dreamcast. Other people may disagree with me. That's fine. I'm wrong sometimes too.
All right, Masa. Favorites?
Okay, so I'm gonna start with the retro ones first, and since I'm a Nintendo fanboy, I'm gonna go with the Super Nintendo. But I don't wanna sound like too much of a Nintendo fanboy, so I'm gonna say that my least favorite is the N64 one. Although Dreamcast does come, close.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, the modern favorites would be Xbox 360, and then it's basically a toss-up between the Wii U and the Switch Pro.
Okay. Such tough decisions. I mean, for me, I think I'm gonna sound a lot like Masa in terms of retro controllers. For me personally, it's got to be the Super Nintendo, and it's most likely due to the amount of time I spent with it. I do want to give a special shout out to the Turbo controller. That's a really good controller. That I don't think gets brought up enough how good that controller is. As far as least favorites retro-wise, it's either the N64 or the Dreamcast. It's probably the Dreamcast. I think I dislike the Dreamcast worse than the N64 controller. And then modern-wise, definitely the Xbox 360 controller. And least favorite, it probably, honestly, the original Well, that's not modern enough.
Yeah.
It's just say the original Wii remote.
Yeah, it's probably either the Wiimote, or maybe the DualShock 4, just because I hate that it has no battery life. It's a good controller, but the lack of battery life makes it hard to use for me.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
But yeah, coolest controller is definitely the Vectrex controller. No, Neo Geo controller. Neo Geo controller for sure. But I think that's about it. Please, as always, guys, I didn't get to say it at the top of the episode, but please subscribe, leave us reviews. We always appreciate that stuff, and I know you guys are listening because people are starting to talk about us. So I know that somebody out there must listen to this stuff. Hit us up. Let us know your top 5 favorite controllers. I think we'll be doing a little bit of a week of controllers for this episode. So if we did, hope you enjoyed that. If we didn't, then maybe we'll do it later on. But thank you guys so much for listening. And before we take off, Masa, can you give us your stuff and where we can find you?
Okay, so yeah, you can find me on Instagram, and my handle is MasaCharvinen09.
All right, Paul, what about you?
On Instagram as well, Paul's Game Room. It's Paul's_Game Room.
Awesome. Special shout out to Ozzy, who couldn't be here today. Shadow of the Collector on Instagram. And you can find me at Welcome to the Game. That's the word welcome, the number 2, the game. Thank you guys so much for everything. We really appreciate you guys listening and downloading. Leave reviews. Let your friends know. Just, keep spreading the word. Thank you so much, guys. Bye.
Thanks.
Peace.